Greetings everyone, I'm Adam Haritan, and today I'm spending some time in a bog in southwestern Pennsylvania, and I'm here specifically to locate one tree. When I find that tree, I want to tell you something about it because there's some mystery involving its existence at this particular site. By most people's expectations, this tree shouldn't grow here for a few reasons. We're too far inland from the coast and we're at too high of an elevation. Additionally, distribution maps of this tree do not include the state of Pennsylvania. And actually, according to state records, this tree is listed as extirpated, meaning this tree, according to the records, no longer grows here in Pennsylvania. Now, this tree isn't necessarily uncommon in North America. You may actually live in a place where this tree thrives, or you may have one growing around your home. But it is uncommon here in Pennsylvania, so uncommon that it's listed as extirpated. And although it's not supposed to be growing here at this particular bog in southwestern Pennsylvania, it is. And because of that, I want to go find it, and I want to unravel some of the mystery involving its residence here. So let's go explore this bog a bit more in depth, and let's go see if we could find this slightly out of place tree known as Atlantic white cedar. Bogs are places of botanical wonder. I love exploring bogs, and it's a shame that an astonishingly large number of them have been drained by humans over the past few centuries. These specialized wetlands support plants that are very different than the plants found in upland habitats. But even plants found in other wetland ecosystems, like swamps and marshes and lake margins, can be very different than the plants found in bogs. Now, before we go find the Atlantic white cedar, I want to point out two wetland specialists that tell us we're in a very boggy place. And I just want to tell you up front, there's so many different plants that I could talk about, but I just want to talk about two that are often overlooked and underappreciated. This colony-forming plant is white beak sedge, Rhynchospora alba. White beak sedge thrives in these nutrient-poor acidic bogs, and it can be found in many parts of North America, including areas along the west coast, but it seems to be most abundant in the Great Lakes and northeast portions of North America. In this particular bog, even from a distance, it's not too difficult to see where the white beak sedge is growing because we can see its very conspicuous white inflorescences. And late summer is a great time to observe white beak sedge because of this particular feature. Otherwise, the plant can be easily overlooked. Another interesting plant in this bog with a somewhat appropriate, though somewhat misleading name is Tawny cottongrass, Aereopherum virginicum. This plant is actually a sedge rather than a true grass, so it's taxonomically placed within the sedge family, which is the Cyperaceae family. Regardless of whether you call it tawny cotton grass or tawny cotton sedge, this plant is still a fascinating organism with a very unique fruiting head that looks like cotton. And these brownish cottony tufts will persist for many months, making these plants almost look like they're covered with snow throughout the autumn and winter seasons. Now, there are many different species of cotton grass, but this particular one, Aereopherum virginicum, is most abundant in northeastern North America. So those are just two among the many indicator plants that tell us we are in a very boggy place. You can see the tawny cotton grass all around me, this plant up here, and a little lower down, it's a little harder to see, but this is the white beak sedge right here. But most people would expect that these two plants would be growing here. Atlantic white cedar, on the other hand, would not be expected to be growing here this far inland from the Atlantic coast and at this high of an elevation. So let's go find this tree, Atlantic white cedar, and let's attempt to demystify the confusion. Okay, so now I'm in the presence of Atlantic white cedar, Camisiporous Thyoides. All those trees that you see back there, those coniferous trees, there's smaller ones, there's medium-sized trees. That's all Camisiporous Thyoides, the Atlantic white cedar. Now there are other common names used to describe that tree, including southern white cedar and swamp cedar, and you will almost always see a hyphen being inserted before that word cedar because, according to many people, it's not a true cedar. Many people actually call it a false cypress, but Atlantic white cedar is probably the name that's most commonly used to describe that tree, so that's the name I'll stick with in this video. Atlantic white cedar is an obligate wetland species, so it makes sense that it would be growing here in this perpetually wet bog. This tree is native to the Atlantic coast of North America, and its range extends from Maine to Georgia, with a separate population from Florida to southern Mississippi. And throughout its extensive range, Atlantic white cedar grows almost exclusively within 125 miles of the coast. That's an interesting feature to note because this bog in southwestern Pennsylvania, where Atlantic white cedar is growing, is clearly outside that range. Now, Atlantic white cedar used to be much more common in North America, and what happened to it over the past few centuries is very similar to what happened to other commercially valuable trees. Atlantic white cedar trees were logged extensively, and their habitats were severely altered. Today, it is estimated that numbers of this tree in North America are less than 10% of what they used to be before Europeans flocked to North America. Now, Atlantic white cedar is a small to medium-sized coniferous tree that typically reaches heights between 30 to 90 feet. Unlike the leaves of pine trees, which tend to be very thin and pointy, the leaves of Atlantic white cedar are flattened and scale-like. They're bluish-green, and when you look closely at the leaves, you will see a distinctive feature of Atlantic white cedar. The margins of the scales are lighter in color, and they connect to form X's. So if you think you are in the presence of Atlantic white cedar and you have access to the foliage, look at the leaves up close and see if you can find these very diagnostic white X's. As I mentioned earlier, this population of Atlantic white cedar is a bit of an anomaly. Although many garden varieties of this tree are sold and planted across the country, we are a bit outside of its natural range here, being more than 125 miles from the Atlantic coast. And at least according to the tree standards, we're a bit high in elevation. Typically, Atlantic white cedar grows around 350 feet above sea level or below. And we are currently standing at 2,700 feet above sea level. So what's going on here? Why are there all these discrepancies involving this tree? Well, to answer those questions, we are going to have to dig into the history of this bog. And once we understand the origins of this bog, we will be able to better understand why this population of Atlantic white cedar is the only wild population in the state of Pennsylvania. Most bogs in the northeast portion of North America are glacially derived bogs, and they can take thousands of years to develop. But the bog at this site is different. It's not glacially derived, and it wasn't even a bog a little over 100 years ago. It was a swampy forest dominated by trees. Not Atlantic white cedar trees, but eastern hemlock trees, Tsuga canadensis. The hemlock forest that previously existed at this site was logged completely in the early 1900s, and the remaining vegetation was deliberately set on fire. Over time, water accumulated in the natural depression that was already here, and the influx of rainfall and snowmelt in conjunction with a rising water table created bog-like conditions. Today, this site contains many species that are very characteristic of glacial bogs in northeastern North America. We already talked about the white beaksedge and tawny cottongrass that inhabit this wetland, but if we take a look around, we will also see blueberry, and cranberry, and sphagnum mosses, and chokeberry, and lots of other plants that thrive in nutrient-poor, acidic bogs. So we've established the fact that this bog is a recent phenomenon. It did not exist here 125 years ago, but through intense human interference, a bog was rapidly created. And I say rapidly according to geological timescales. Now, as I mentioned before, this population of Atlantic white cedar is the only wild population here in Pennsylvania, but the big question is, how did it get here? Well, at this point in the video, thinking about all that we just covered, the answer might seem obvious. Atlantic white cedar inhabits this bog today because it was most likely planted here by humans. And this planting probably took place in the 1940s. So what you see here is considered to be a naturalized population of Atlantic white cedar in southwestern Pennsylvania. The tree is clearly outside of its classically defined range, but it's still living in an ecosystem that supports its growth. Now, this population of Atlantic white cedar has been intensively studied by ecologists, and a little over a decade ago, researchers by the names of Adam Haritan and Thad Yorks published some of their findings in the Natural Areas Journal. In their 2009 study, the researchers discussed a lot of the topics we covered in this video, as well as the conservation value of this particular population of Atlantic white cedar. According to the study, Recruitment of Atlantic white cedar in this bog has been steady since the initial establishment of the trees in the 1940s, and direct management by humans doesn't seem to be necessary at this time to ensure future success of this naturalized population. These trees seem to be doing just fine without human intervention. Interestingly though, Atlantic white cedar is officially still considered to be extirpated from Pennsylvania, despite this naturalized population existing here at the bog. The last time Pennsylvanians witnessed Atlantic white cedar stands that weren't directly planted by humans was probably in the 1700s, based on historical records alluding to the tree's presence in the southeastern corner of the state. Commercial interests, money, and probably a subconscious desire to recreate their abandoned homes caused European settlers to participate in actions that eliminated Atlantic white cedar completely from Pennsylvania and reduced the numbers significantly throughout the rest of its range. Fortunately, Atlantic white cedar still grows and thrives in some areas, especially nearer to the Atlantic coast, and we can feel good knowing that many conservation efforts have been established over the years to protect this species. Now, some people might consider this tree to be out of place here in southwestern Pennsylvania, in a bog that was formerly a dense, swampy, healthy hemlock forest. But despite being so far inland and at such a high elevation, these Atlantic white cedar trees seem, at least to me at this particular point in time, to belong here. Especially when I consider that they've been here a lot longer than I have, and they can survive these conditions better than I ever could. Thanks so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate it and hope you'll learn something about Atlantic white cedar. If you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed to the Learn Your Land YouTube channel, I encourage you to do that. You could also head on over to learnyourland.com and sign up for the email newsletter. And if you are on social media, you can give me a follow at Learn Your Land on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again, truly appreciate it. I'll see you on the next one.